Hello, good afternoon. Today is Thursday, September 19th, 2024. My name is Ashley Glover, and I'm here with attorney Diana Lattanzio, and we are happy to welcome you to our webinar, From Risk to Security, Understanding Medicaid Asset Protection Trusts. So let's kick off with just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is a half hour. We put together a PowerPoint, which is being shared on screen along with our webcams. To minimize background noise, your mics have been muted. Please use the Q&A box to submit any questions. We will address them at the end of the presentation. You're welcome to communicate with other attendees using the chat box. This session is being recorded, and we will email you a link to the recording afterwards. Lastly, we value your feedback, so please let us know how we did in the survey that will appear on your screen at the end of the webinar. All right, let's get to know a little bit about our presenter, Diana. She is partner at Russo Law Group and the lead planning attorney in our Garden City office. Diana is highly experienced with 20 years specializing in elder law, Medicaid, special needs, and estate planning. She's also admitted to several professional organizations, and you can read those on the screen. So thank you very much, Diana. I will pass this over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining me and spending some time with me this afternoon. This is a topic I am very passionate about, and it is basically discussing Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, all of its benefits, along with Medicaid eligibility rules, requirements, and the most common long-term care Medicaid programs. It's a short seminar, so we're going to try to cover as much ground as we can, and I will stay at the end to answer any questions. So we're going to start with a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust and how it can help you. First and foremost, the MAP that you're going to keep seeing on your screen, the acronym, that stands for obviously Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. That type of a trust is irrevocable, and it's usually used in connection with long-term care planning. It has so many benefits, but some of them are basically to protect any income that is generated from the trust so that the income is not used against you in a Medicaid budget if you are applying for long-term care. And also the principal in the trust, if you're funding it with, significant assets. It will trigger or start your look-back period for Medicaid. It also offers a lot of creditor protection. It's a much better estate planning tool instead of outright gifting. And it does minimize taxes and preserves your capital gain step up in tax basis exemptions. And it also avoids any type of a court proceeding when you pass away, such as an administrative proceeding, probate proceeding in court. And it also avoids an estate recovery lien if you are the recipients of a Medicaid benefits during your lifetime. So what goes into this Medicaid Asset Protection Trust? The best way I like to describe it to my clients is that it is an entity that I'm creating for you, such as a corporation or an LLC. It's kind of like this bubble, and it's not enough to have it. That's, half of the goal. The other goal is to properly fund it. And so we normally recommend that you fund it with your primary residence. You can also have investment properties, that can go into it. Liquid assets such as bank accounts, brokerage accounts, those are all fine. Annuities with some, exceptions, and life insurance is always, a great funding option. What you cannot put into it are any retirement assets. The retirement accounts must remain in your name individually, and the principal is protected anyway against Medicaid. So it just, makes sense to fund the trust with real estate, life insurance, and other liquid assets. So there is a connection between Medicaid Asset Protection Trusts and Medicaid. So like I stated earlier, there are so many benefits to this type of a trust, but the main benefit or the main goal that most of my clients are trying to achieve is that they wanted to start their look back period so that everything that they're putting into the trust is not counted against them if they should ever need to apply for one of the Medicaid programs. And that would be either home care or nursing home care. There are some tax considerations with creating these types of trusts. One great benefit is that it has unlimited funding options, which means that it can always continue to receive assets at any time, except that you just need to be aware that you may have a stagger in your look back period if you choose to do that. The best way to fund a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust is to put all the assets in at one time when you're actually creating the trust, so that the look back period on all of those assets remain the same, although you can stagger it. It does qualify as a grantor trust, which means you do not have a separate tax filing requirement. So the trust itself does not have to file tax returns. It's like a flow through entity, and you would claim any income that the trust assets generate on your individual tax return. It doesn't implicate or prevent you from, if you're selling either the primary residence or any liquid assets that have highly appreciated. It doesn't disqualify you from preserving your capital gain exemption and exclusion on that property. For example, your primary residence, if you've lived there for at least 2 years, you do get a $250,000 offset. So transferring that into your trust would still preserve that. It doesn't make any difference. The trust still qualifies for that. And when you pass away, it's considered an incomplete gift for IRS purposes. And so your loved ones would get to take advantage of a step up in cost basis, which would avoid or reduce any capital gain taxes ultimately, if and when the property is sold. So even though this trust is irrevocable, and that can be scary to hear sometimes, it actually does have a lot of flexibility. So that's why it's one of my, most common plans for my clients. It allows you to remove and replace a trustee at any time. So the way that I like to describe it is you're, the owner of this company or this entity that we're creating, and the trustee is the person that you are appointing in charge, like a manager, but you still control firing the manager and replacing the manager. So you still have control indirectly through the trustee. Also, if you're placing your primary residence into this trust, it can be scary because you're not owning that property anymore in your name, but you are reserving an exclusive occupancy right, which means you can live there the rest of your life rent free. You don't have to worry about, you hear these horror stories that, children are evicting parents and the parents are homeless or have nowhere to go. That's never a risk here. So you have the protection that you can always live there the rest of your life. You can always still qualify for any of your preferred tax exemptions, such as senior exemption or enhanced star, because we don't want you to pay higher taxes, unnecessarily. And you can also pick and choose the beneficiaries of your trust, and you can change that during your lifetime without notifying anyone, even though the trust is irrevocable. So that's an added benefit as well. Now we're going to discuss Medicaid eligibility requirements. So like I said, usually a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, that's why it's named that way. It is an irrevocable trust, but one of the goals normally for the clients is that it will qualify them for Medicaid benefits if they should need that during their lifetime at some point. So what you have on the screen right now are the current thresholds. So these numbers change yearly. Generally in January of every year, the numbers get adjusted for the cost of living adjustment. But currently under this program, you're allowed to keep up to $31,175 in liquid assets. That's like money that you have in the bank. $1,752 in income. That would be like Social Security, pension, your IRA, RMD distributions. and you're allowed to qualify with a home with an equity value of a little over $1 million. Now, that's not always the best plan to apply if you own a property in your name. It is a little bit risky, but you can, if we needed to push the application through, it cannot be a reason for a Medicaid denial. So Medicaid is this huge umbrella that has so many different programs, and it is what we call means tested. That means you can't automatically qualify. You have to have a medical need. There is an asset test and there is an income test. And just like any other rule, there are always exemptions to the rules. Okay. So what you're allowed to keep are assets of 31,175. That's for an individual. If a couple is applying together, so sometimes we can't control when someone gets sick. And if a married couple gets sick at the same time and we need a joint application, then the asset test is a little bit higher for both individuals applying. That's the 42,312 number. Again, we went over the house that you can qualify for, although, it's not my preferred course of action. I like to do planning with the house, but you can qualify as long as it has an equity value under 1,071,000. You can have a prepaid funeral contract in an irrevocable amount. So that means you can fund it with, $50,000, but you can never take any of that money back or change the contract at any time. You can also have a car with an unlimited amount, value. You can have personal belongings and a small amounts of life insurance with a cash value of $1,500 or less to qualify for Medicaid. Now I'm going to discuss some of the most common Medicaid programs. So again, it's a very large umbrella in the Medicaid world, but there are three programs that most of our clients are the most interested in when we're talking about long-term care. The first program is home care. So that's usually where everyone wants to first try to apply for. And that's basically, like aging at home. And then we have assisted living, which is kind of an intermediary between aging at home and being in a 24-hour skilled facility. And then there's nursing home care as well. So those are the three major programs, and we're going to quickly discuss each one. The first one is home care. It's also referred to as community Medicaid. So those terms are interchangeable. And that's again, when you're starting to slow down, you're getting a little older, and you're starting to need help with your activities of daily living, which are also referred to, you may hear the acronym ADLs. And those are things like walking, feeding, toileting, housekeeping, dressing, bathing, things that maybe we take for granted every day. Under this program, you can actually apply and have personal care aides come to the home to provide support in the home for the applicant so that you can be properly cared for at home and age in place. Currently, under this program, are no penalties on the look back period. There is a 3-month look back period, but there are no penalties for any transfers. That is subject to change next year. So in sometime in 2025, we don't have a definitive date yet. There are some talks that this program will substantially be changing with the 2.5-year look back period and penalties assessed on any transfers, although that has been the plan since 2020 and it keeps getting told, thankfully, and hopefully it will continue to get delayed. But this is a really great program. My father is a participant in this program. I really believe in it, and it really helps to keep seniors at home and age in place. We did go over the income allowance that you're allowed to keep of $1,732. If you have more than that in income, which most people do, there is a way to also shelter any excess income, and that's through what's called a pooled income trust, which is run by charities. There are 22 licensed in New York. But there is a way, even if you have over 1732 in income, to still qualify for this program, get the services you need, and keep any excess income so that you can afford to still live in the community in your home. The second program under the Medicaid umbrella for long-term care is an assisted living facility program. So I had asked Ashley to try to get a really nice picture for this of hotel style living, and she did a great job in doing that. And that's how I like to refer to this program. This is more like a hotel style living. These facilities are beautiful. There's one I actually have an eye on myself that I hope to, be in one day. If possible. The problem with these facilities are that they're just really expensive and that it's usually unaffordable for most, middle America clients. But there are some facilities that do have a contract with Medicaid. They are some select facilities, so it's not every single one that you may tour. Some of them have reserved Medicaid beds, and this is more of like a new trend. And we're trying to get more and more to also join in. And you can be in one of these rooms. It's not a room that you would have alone. It is a shared room, and they would cap the amounts of room and board that you would have to pay. So Medicaid would only cover the home care service portion of it. So when you reside in one of these facilities, the bill that you get every month is bifurcated, which means that there are charges for the room and board, and then there are charges for the personal care aid aspect of it. And so Medicaid would pay for certain beds in these facilities if they become available only for the medical care portion of it. You would still be responsible for the room and board, but it is definitely at a discounted rate. And this is when you're higher functioning and you're able to be admitted into one of these facilities. They do have some have long waiting periods of like 2 years or more where you do have to private pay to be there for that time, and then they will transition you into a Medicaid bed if and when one becomes available to you. And then the third program under the Medicaid umbrella for long-term care is nursing home care. And that's really if we've tried the other options and they just don't work because your needs are far advanced for those programs, which means that basically you need 24-hour skilled care that you would not be able to obtain being in the home, even if you had this personal care assistance, or even in an assisted living facility. So this is more like hospital type setting, and you would get everything that you need, room and board and 24-hour around the clock care. The resource level is the same as under the home care umbrella, which is $31,175. The income level is much different. So the income level is only $50. Under home care, it was 1,732. But if you're permanently placed in a facility, they're basically covering everything. Room and board, food, social activities, everything. So they do allow you a $50 stipend that you can keep for things like, if you wanted to get, your hair and nails done, barber services. They do have clothing sales there at the facility that you can use that to pay for. But generally, the rest of your income is directed to the facility and assigned to the facility, and it is your contribution toward your cost of care. But Medicaid would cover the difference, and it is substantial. So if we're looking at any of the facilities on Long Island, generally privately paying, it's going to cost anywhere between $16,000 and $20,000 per month. If you're anywhere in the boroughs in New York City, it's a little bit less. It usually runs between, $13,000 and $15,000 a month, but that's still a very high price. And, again, most people don't have those means or would be depleting their, assets that they worked so hard for very quickly in order to pay for that care. So the Medicaid option is a great option to try to protect and preserve your assets for your loved ones, but still get the care that you need in the proper setting. And if you have a community spouse, so that means if you're a married couple and one spouse is sick and needs to be in a nursing home, but there is a well spouse that is still living in the community in the primary residence at home, then the income budget is adjusted to provide for that. So then the well spouse is allowed to retain $3,853.50 in his or her income. And if the well spouse's income is less than that amount, then we can shift some of the applicant's income to the wealth spouse to cap them at that amount, because that's what it's presumed would be enough to keep the wealth spouse in the community, and maintain their lifestyle. Okay, so even if you didn't properly plan, so currently there's a 5-year look back period for nursing home care under the Medicaid guidelines. So that means that you really need to plan in advance of a crisis to make sure that you are protecting and preserving all of your assets in the event that situation should ever occur. But there are, again, exceptions to the rules. There are some exemptions to transfers, so that even if you didn't think ahead and plan ahead, you can transfer your assets to a spouse, even at the time of a crisis, and still protect and preserve your assets and qualify the spouse that needs the care to enter a skilled facility and apply for Medicaid to cover the cost of that. Or if you're in a situation where you have, a predeceased spouse, but you have a disabled child, and now the surviving parent needs the help and needs to be in a facility, you can actually transfer all of your assets to that disabled child and still qualify for Medicaid and protect and preserve everything. The only hiccup in that scenario is that I would need to really analyze if the disabled child is receiving any government benefits, because the last thing I would want to do is get the parents on Medicaid and get them the care that they need, and now disqualified a disabled child from any, government benefits or change their lifestyle in any way. So we would need to really conduct an analysis at that time. Or also a caretaker child. So if you've had a child that moved into your residence for at least 2 years that was helping take care of you to keep you at home for as long as possible so that you can age in place, and you didn't really think ahead in planning, we can transfer your primary residence to that caretaker child, and we would still protect and preserve the house and get you the care that you need. And even if none of those situations apply and you don't qualify under any of the current exemption transfer rules, there's an emergency plan that I can implement, and I can still save you about 50% of, your assets. So there's always hope. There's always a plan. We can always help you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you ever need the care or know anyone that needs this type of coverage. So we covered a lot in a very short span of time. So what we discussed was what a MAPT is, which is a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, all of the benefits that a trust can offer you or your loved one, the Medicaid eligibility requirements, and 3 different Medicaid programs: the Medicaid home care, also referred to as community Medicaid; assisted living, which is also under the home care umbrella and follows the same eligibility rules; and finally, nursing home Medicaid or skilled care under the Medicaid umbrella.
Hey, Q&A time. If anyone
Yes.
has questions, please send them over now. I'll jump to the next slide, um, but we're here to answer any questions. So, what makes Russo Law Group different? Our clients consistently commend us for our dedication, accessibility, comprehensive legal services, and extensive experience, which provides them with peace of mind and confidence. Established in 1985, Russo Law Group is a boutique firm specializing in elder law, special needs planning, estate planning, and estate administration. With 3 convenient office locations across Long Island, our firm boasts a team of 10 attorneys ready to step right in and help. Having served over 17,000 families, we are proud to be recognized as a best law firm in elder law by US News. Alrighty, so for upcoming news and events, we have 2 seminars next month. One is in Nassau and one is in Suffolk County. Diana will be our featured speaker at the Pie at Salvatore's in Bayshore. For more details and registration, please visit our website, vjrussolaw.com. All right, Diana, well done. I see we've got a couple questions coming in, so let me jump back here. And I think we'll start with Jill.
Yep. Okay, so we have a few questions coming in. The first question is, if I am in good health, at what age should you consider a MAPT? So generally, I tell my clients after retirement age, or when you're pretty certain that you're not going to want to pull any equity out of the home anymore, because it's not impossible, but it is more difficult and you're very limited if you do want to obtain a home equity line of credit, or you need, to refinance or mortgage the property. If it is owned in an irrevocable Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, it's going to limit your options in financing. And, most people, when they're younger and in really good health, don't want to relinquish any aspects of control. So normally it's something that you really start thinking about as you age. So, don't wait too long, because there is that 5-year look back period. So I would say anywhere, between, mid 70s to early 80s would be a good time, if not a little bit earlier. But it's really a matter of comfort when you're comfortable doing that. So I hope that answered that. The second question is, what happens if you have to go to a facility and your trust says you stay in the home until you pass? Does your proxy lose the property? So I'm not sure I fully understand that question. So your trust doesn't say that you must stay in the house. Maybe that's where a little bit was lost in translation. Your trust gives you the option of remaining in the house so that you have exclusive occupancy during your lifetime. That doesn't mean you're mandated to stay in. You can't leave. Of course, if you have health concerns and you can't remain at home with the proper care, then nothing would prevent you from moving into, and being placed in a permanent facility. And your proxy, I'm not sure if you're referring to a healthcare proxy or a trustee, but as long as the primary residence was transferred into the trust at 5 years or more after you're being placed in the facility, then the home and any other assets that you funded the trust with are protected dollar for dollar against the cost of long-term care with no rights of recovery. So that's why I was stating earlier that it's best to fund the trust all at once rather than stagger it. That way the penalty runs at the same time, and after the 5 years, everything in the trust is protected. The third question is, how does the 5-year look back work, assuming someone had 500,000 in assets? So if you have 500 in assets, I wouldn't put every dollar into the trust. I would, come up with a formula that you're comfortable with so that you keep some assets outside of the trust that would be used for your needs, so that you still maintain your independence and, you still have complete control over those assets. But anything you put in the trust, regardless of if it's, 200,000, 100,000, 500,000, or millions, after the 5 years, anything that's in that cannot be looked at as yours and would not compromise your eligibility under any of those programs that we discussed. The fourth question is more logistics. So it's asking if we have a New York City office. We don't have a New York City office since after COVID anymore, but we do have offices that we use in New York City and Manhattan. So if we have a client that does need an appointment in the city, we can make arrangements to use an office there. I don't think there are any other questions. I'm just going to check
Yeah,
the chat.
I'll read this one.
Okay.
I have to lean forward. It's so small.
Okay.
What happens if your parent has a trust that they stay in the home and they end up in a facility? Does the family lose the trust?
Okay.
So what happens if your parent has a trust that they stay in the home and they end up in a facility? Does the family lose the trust?
So again, the trust isn't mandating that the parent stays at home. It's only a right that the parent has. But if it's not feasible, then they can move into a facility as long as the house was in the trust for 5 years or more, then the house would be protected and the family would not lose the house in the trust. But if you don't plan in advance, then it is a possibility that if you didn't make the 5 year look back period and there's no one living there anymore because the parent who had the right to live there is now in a facility, that you would have to sell the house. And if I'm reverting to emergency plan, then I may not be able to protect the proceeds dollar for dollar, but at worst, I can protect 50%, which isn't bad at the end of the day. With a MAPT, can the income be distributed to me? So yes, if you have two options with the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. You can be the income beneficiary, which means that if there is any income that the trust produces, or if you're placing a primary residence in that has a rental income, you would still be entitled to receive the income. So it's a discussion that we have during our consultation as to what makes the most sense. The only thing you need to realize in that instance is that if you decide that you want to remain the income beneficiary, if you're ever receiving Medicaid benefits, that income will be part of your budget. So that if you are ultimately placed in a facility, the facility would get assigned the income. So it's not always the best idea. We definitely do a financial analysis to see what the best options are, but you can retain the income if you would like to. What if most of your assets are mostly in IRA, Roth IRA? Would you still recommend a MAPT at least 80%? Yes. So like I said, the IRA, any retirement or qualified assets are protected. The principal is protected under the Medicaid rules as long as you are taking your required distributions. But that's not usually all of your financial portfolio. It may be a big portion of it, but usually there is a primary residence, some liquid assets, life insurance. So in that event, in that instance, I would recommend that you create the trust, transfer your other assets into the trust, and then you just keep the retirement assets and have your designated beneficiaries on those. With a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, can my trustee sell my home with my approval and then buy another home owned by the trust? So yes, the trustee would have full discretion to sell the asset if need be, and then purchase a replacement property as well. So it's very fluid in what can be done under a trust such as Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. Have you ever heard of an agency doing a trust for free? I have not, and I would probably, advise you against that. I don't know of any agencies that would create a trust. Attorneys are licensed to do this and experienced to do this, and I wouldn't recommend that you have, a layman or any type of an agency create a complicated, sophisticated type of an asset protection trust. There are a lot of considerations, including tax considerations. So you want to be very leery of doing that.
Hey, we had a couple of questions and clarifications in the chat.
Okay. So let me go
Happy
through that.
to
All
address
right.
those. The first one is asking about consultation and maybe a ballpark on fees. I know it's tough to say without having a meeting first, but
Okay. I'm not seeing that, Ashley. Can you maybe read it?
yeah, he's asking for a consultation and fees.
Oh, okay. So our consultation fee is $600, and that includes a 90-minute consultation. And if you retain for services, we can apply it toward the retainer. And the fees, it really depends on the complexity. So there's no real cookie cutter. But if you want a general range, it would be anywhere between, and it's going to be a broad range, but that's the best I can do, is between 5 and 10,000.
I would like to just make one small note. For those of you that are on today, we will be sending a coupon for 200 off the planning meeting. So it would, as a courtesy, it would be 400, and we could still apply that.
Great.
Um,
I do see
we,
something for clarification, community
yes.
Medicaid. So they're asking about the income is 1732 a month. The asset level for a couple that's applying is 42,312. The primary residence, you can apply still owning the home as long as the equity value is under the 1,071,000, but it's not the best plan, because if you're applying and you still own the house in your name and you receive these Medicaid benefits, when you pass away, New York State will place a lien on the home to recover the amounts of money expended in providing the care during your lifetime. So it's really just deferring the cost. It is better than paying privately because it does come at a discounted rate. But again, it's not the best plan. We do use it sometimes in certain limited situations, but the best plan would be to really plan in advance.
We had one more question come in.
Okay.
It's about RMDs.
All right. So the question is, if your RMDs are over 31,175 annually, does that penalize you from Medicaid eligibility? So no, the RMDs are not considered a resource. RMDs are part of your income. So the resource would be money that you have in the bank, brokerage accounts, life insurance with cash value. The income, that's the 31,175 magic number. The income is a stream of income that you're receiving every month. So that's like Social Security, pension, and your required minimum distributions. That's counted toward the income allowance of 1,732. So if you're receiving more than 32,000 in income yearly, it doesn't disqualify you from Medicaid. It's just that 32,000 a year is now added into your income budget, if that makes sense. So Medicaid looks at assets differently. They look at it from a principal perspective or an income stream, and they can't count it twice. So it's either or. It's either an income stream or it's principal. If it's principal, all of your combined assets have to be under the 31,175. If it's income, you're allowed to keep 1,732 a month. But if you're applying for home care and you have more than 1732 a month in income, you can join a pooled income trust and still shelter the excess income. I know it's very complicated. All right.
Of course it is. I think
Yeah.
I think that was the last one. Uh, so we could go ahead and wrap up. I don't see any
Okay.
other questions. So having said that, thank you all for joining us. And Diana, thank you for your time and sharing your knowledge with us today. Until next time, I hope everyone stays well and stays safe.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.